Hi Richard. So I take a deep look through all your swings today. Thanks for the material. It's good enough. There is a lot of things, a lot of views, so that makes me able to really see and not guess. So thanks for that. We're gonna take a look at your swings, and today we're gonna really focus on one thing. I won't try to give you a full blueprint because your pattern is a little bit unusual, and I don't really like guessing. So instead of just guessing half of the blueprint, sorry, when you will get around the biggest flaw. I think what would be nice is if you were able to just focus on that for a few weeks and then send me new videos and I'll do another analysis of those. I don't like guessing and I won't, so it won't be just one analysis. Of course, second will be free, but I really decide to do that because I think that's the way to help you the best. So. Right now there's a big problem with the way you use your pelvis and the problems, the reaction, the compensations that come with it. You told me about big blocks, occasional hooks. Absolutely. I mean, it's what happens when we have your pattern. You also wanted to know if you would be able to lower your ball flight. Absolutely. Right now, you have a few things that makes the ball kind of shoot up. You have right pelvic tilt. You have a spine that wants to get to right lateral bend, so a very high left shoulder. The lag is lost a little bit early, so your arm straightens, and it's from there it's impossible to retain the lag and the shaft lean. So again, an element that makes you shoot up. So yeah, absolutely, your ball flight should be way lower after when when we're are through the changes. For speed, it's actually the same. You are saying you were hitting like 100 miles per hour. You have a pretty strong build. I think you should be hitting 105, 110 soon when we get a better use of your lower body and so you can use what you're doing good with the upper body. Um, okay, start with what I like. I always do that. I think it's better to know what you don't need to change first, and so you don't get, I mean, trapped or pushed in a bad direction from anyone. I mean, friend, somebody who asks, who, I mean, if you ask somebody for advice and they see one thing and just focus on this and it's the wrong thing, it could hurt you. So, um, posture, in my opinion, is good. You have a pretty strong grip. That's not the perfect view, but you sent me another one, which is good. Okay, so we can see that you have a decent right shoulder. It's not internally rotated, so your grip is kind of strong. It's not extremely externally rotated, so it's good. It's pretty neutral. The right hand is strong. The left hand is strong too. The only thing I would kind of question is the fact that you have the hands really far forward. Um, it could mess up a few things in the takeaway and in the tendency of the scap moves and the shoulder moves. So right now you're not really hurt by it, but we need to monitor that later when you get the change done. I tend to prefer something quite around here, like inner left side. I think it's a good. I mean, for irons at least, it's a good middle ground. Where's your driver? Here. So with the driver, it's almost the same. I mean, we could imagine that the camera is shooting a little bit like that, so it could emphasize this straight. But yeah, I mean, you're not really hurt by it. As I said, you're not rolling a ton. The club face open, the shoulders open, like so, which could be a problem with hands so far forwards. You don't come off your posture a big deal. Not a very ton of right lateral bend in the takeaway, so I'm fine with that. But we need to monitor this a little bit. Um, the rest is good in my opinion. Not a ton to look for. Um, here we could imagine that you have a little bit. I mean, we would need a belt and a tucked-in shirt, but anyway, I'm saying that because it goes with the other things that could hurt you. So some people are really fine with this posture. You don't have a ton of angles. Armpits are over the balls of the feet, so it's all right. I would maybe shoot for a little bit less angle here. So a pelvis that's tiny bit more neutral, not perfectly horizontal. That's, I mean, full posterior pelvic tilt, like so, is not really desirable either. Could mess up a few things. Try to stay neutral, but definitely don't go in this direction, especially with the problem you have in the right hip. So yeah, that's really the only thing. I mean, if you want to make it perfect, I think you could focus on that a little bit. You have good moves on the upper body. I can see what you're trying to do. So here we can see that the right elbow is lower than the left, so that tells me you're not coming over the top. I can see it even better on this view here. Here we can see that you're not over the top, your scapula is not protracting, etc., which could happen with your pattern, so it's not. So you're really trying to perform some things that are really good for your upper body. Again, here, it's alright. Up until, I mean, where geometry don't match anymore, you're kind of doing a good thing with the upper body. I can see that you're trying to have this kind of shape. Left shoulder is very high for a ton of reasons. Right pelvic tilt, what happens here is a reason, but also you're trying to create something that's nice here. So again, that's a good thing. You're trying to, I mean, your backswing's not that far off. I mean, it could be hurt way more by what happens in your right hip. You end up in a pretty good place. The spine's a little bit straight. I'll get back to that. But I mean, club face at the top is alright. You don't have crazy reverse scapular motions, so that's good. What we can also say is that um, with everything that's going on here, club face is reacting pretty nicely. I mean, you have the strong grip that accommodates for that. Of course, it's easier for you, but here the club face is not getting wide open. People that early extend typically have a tendency to have the face open, getting back and then flip rolling. So maybe it's because of your strong grip or anything or something else, but I mean, your club face ends up in a pretty good place, so that will make things way easier. Of course, you cannot retain these good moves, and we can see that near impact, the arms straighten quite a lot. Lag will be lost. I mean, it's just a given. That's not possible to have a geometry that matches contact with the ball if you wouldn't do that. So yeah, here we can see that the arms are going to straighten, the lag will be lost, but up until this point, I mean, your upper body is really trying to perform good moves, and I think we won't need a ton of fixes for this upper body. Let me look at my cheat sheet, see if I just said everything. Sorry, it's a bit late, so I'll just try to not miss anything. Just give me 10 seconds. Yeah. Last thing will be the behavior of the left leg, left hip. I think you're trying to do a good thing again. Through impact, it's straightening. It's trying to push to give a little room from everything. I mean, and the timing of it is good. It's not an endless. You are a bit sliding. You say that in your emails, of course. That's for sure. I mean, that's something that we can see here very clearly, even if it's a driver. I would imagine irons. You may slide even more for the contact. You have a ball position that's a bit far forward, to be honest, but maybe it encourages this slide. But anyway, pretty big movement there. But I mean, even so, I mean the left hip. Look at your left foot movements. I mean it's sliding. It's sliding. Sorry, it's floating. It's rotating. So you have a good moves there. Again, it's gonna make things easier. Okay, so let's go to the problem, shall we? So, um, what's happening? The biggest thing that we would obviously want to stop is this extension and transition. You told me about early extension. I mean, you really don't have a choice actually. So let's look at the. Okay, it's going to be a rough guesstimation, whatever. Let's look at the trunk balance and the backswing, where your head doesn't move quite a bit, but as you can see, all this portion of your torso is moving down. What it tells us is that your hips are going to a bit too much of flexion, and that you don't create enough left lateral bend. Sorry, you're not going up enough, and maybe it would be in this from this camera angle. You're not going in. We would like you to go in this direction, so up and away from the ball, which is not what you do. So that puts you in a situation where your right hip here has a ton of angle in it. This looks extreme the way I drew it. It's on purpose because you have to figure out that you are turned in this position, so we would need kind of an oblique view to see exactly what's going on. This one is going to be helping. So as you can see, there is this angle. If we neutralize kind of your pelvic rotation here, so this angle is way too closed. We would like something that's more neutral, maybe somewhere around there. That would be better. And what's happening, of course, because everything is a reaction to that after that, is okay. Let's draw your head too. So, of course, if we look here, that's the obvious. Quite unusual, but I mean it's just very understandable from the moves that are triggered and the things that you try and do. So the right foot is sliding towards the ball and away from the ball, which is quite unusual. And the right knee, if you can see, is not flexing then extending. If anything, it's staying neutral and then flexing. So I'm going to explain that. And your head is going this way, and your lower body is going to go that way. So that's the major flow, of course. That puts your plane out of whack. That makes you in a bad spot to rotate. So we are going to just take a further look at that and just explain what's happening. So first thing first, here you can see that your right toe is moving up at the end of the backswing. This angle is very acute, and you kind of have a deep, I mean, relative to everything, relative to your torso that moves in this direction, you have a relatively deep right hip. So that tells us you have right hip flexion. That's the main problem in your swing, right hip flexion and backswing. A bit of left load comes with it. If you, in regards to left knee flexion, if you see here, the left knee ends up way in front of the toes. And this angle, if we would need another view, but I have it because you sent me so much stuff, which is really nice. And It's gonna help a few people who might want to monitor this. Here you can see that your left hip is dipping down and is going towards the ball, and your left knee is flexing quite a bit. So yeah, it moved a ton and it moved towards the ball. So with the right hip flexion, typically there is a serious amount of left load that comes with it, because if this angle is acute, then whatever turn you're gonna have plus this, you're gonna kind of tend to left load. So that's a given. So you kind of have to be here at the top. You cannot flex and be on the right. It would be ridiculous. You would move so far off, so it wouldn't be possible. I mean, to make the journey back. So yeah, that's one thing. That's one thing. And because you are okay, I need to find a spot exactly in between so you can see me perfectly. So if you have this, I don't see how you can keep this hip low and not go forwards. This is not really possible. Otherwise, you would have to have zero pelvic turn and go flexion, flexion down and have zero hip turn. But because you have some, you go down. So again, a bit of left load. I think it will go away when you have the proper movement on your right hip. We just need to monitor that. That's why we need further analysis when you go through the changes, and I cannot do everything in one setting. And yeah, okay. Oh, so right hip flexion, a bit of a left load, left knee. Maybe try to stay a little bit higher with the left hip, a bit. Don't give in and put all your weight on your left toes. Try to stay a little bit more neutral, especially through the half, 3/4 of the backswing. Have the weight a bit more on the whole foot and not going straight to your toes right away. Again, what is it going to do? It's going to trigger hip extension. So this is exactly what we see. Massive right hip extension. So much actually that your right foot is going to slide in this direction. It's really not, it's very understandable. So if this angle is going to go like so, and less acute and less acute and less acute, where is your leg going to go? There. And because the foot is here, the weight is on the right toes, and that you said to me that you wanted to keep your touche back and your torso forward. So if this is not giving up, so it is, but if this doesn't go up enough relative to this hip extension, if the rate of this hip extension is greater than the way your torso gets up, what's going to happen? You are going to have the foot going there. And another thing, and that's again a little bit unusual, but it explains what you're doing with the right leg. You said you were trying to keep the touche back and also have the torso moving towards the ball, staying in place, staying pointed to the ground. So the only solution when you have that, because I mean, if you do that and this, you're gaining so much height that the arms need to extend, everything needs to be released to have a contact and not whiff it going on top of the ball. So in order to not gain all this height, I think that explains why the right knee is kind of staying in place and then flexing. Because if it were completely extending, you would gain even more height, and maybe it would be incompatible. So you kind of, okay, I'm gonna need a chair because doing it slow motion, I'm gonna fall down. But anyway, if you are extending and extending, you gain height. But if you extend at the hip and kind of flex the knee, as you can see the level of my hip, I mean, of course it's already high, but it doesn't go completely high, at the highest. So that's why you kind of slide in this direction. yeah, I think that's what's underlying underlying under no, that's lying under this unusual pattern, and that's the reason for all of it. So it's almost like you were doing a flamingo drill and hitting with just your left foot on the ground. That's actually what happens here. As you can see, this foot's on the ground, this foot's not even, not sure it's even touching, it's just grazing, bruising, grazing the grass. So kind of unusual, but of course it's not perfect to trigger good pelvic rotation. So that's the main thing that's going on. Now I'm going to just get a little overview of the consequences and the way you get something functional out of it, and then we'll go to the blueprint that you need to work on the next weeks. So you cannot use ground properly for good rotation. You cannot really turn your pelvis with this move, and you do have to create correct geometry. So we were saying that you were extending up, of course, using your angles. So basically everything goes up. So you still need to reach the ball. So your arms are going to extend. At impact, they are both extended. So that's make this angle impossible to retain. You still need to have some kind of these moves. These moves. If you are extending, trying to reach, there's no way this angle is not gonna it's gonna snap. So here comes the high balls, and I mean this is very difficult to not have any rotation. Having a strong grip and a kind of a close face help to not do that when you extend, and just do something like so, which again that's good. That's gonna help for the when things will change. It will help to have this kind of baseline pattern instead of this one. So you're gonna get way more comfortable in a few. Yeah, I think in a few sessions you can get way more stable. Um, so the way you need to create geometry, because you have this extension and this, and the lag is lost, is you still have to make a low point that's compatible. So you have to move towards the ball, towards the target, slide quite a bit. That's I drew the lines already. We could see that you had your left hip way past the left ankle. So again, not ideal for having perfect rotation. But of course, I mean, if you have your right hip staying in place and shooting in this direction, I mean, having the pelvis open is not going to happen. So I wouldn't really mind too much on this slide. I mean, there's really no way you can create proper geometry if you didn't have that slide. We can look at your tailbone movements. Of course, they are going to go tons. I mean, it's already a lot towards target. It comes with the left load here. It's going to be more, and just now maybe it's going to back up, but it's not going to back up a lot. It's going to go back after impact. So now it's going back and it's staying in place for the tailbone, but it's too late. I mean, you've slid too far forwards. It's a bit too late. So again, you have to do that to create a geometry that with a club path that has the ball on its way. I mean, there's just no way around. Something else to have another look at things. It's gonna be good with this view. Okay. Take a look at. I mean, I already drew this, but imagine your pelvis is like so. It ends up here at the end of the backswing. So it would be nice to have a belt buckle, but you can see that there is a ton of angle here. Because this angle is there and you lose height with the left hip, this spine has to stay relatively straight. If you were to, you need to fix this thing. If you flex the right hip, flex the left hip, have right pelvic tilt, if you were to have any kind of proper movements in the upper spine, so we know it's left lateral bend going then into right. I don't really see the equation being balanced. I mean, you would fall over. So the spine has to stay straight. So you don't really benefit from this kind of space creation. This movement here and here, with the sacrum going back and the spine. I'm exaggerating. This move here is also creating a connection between your pelvis and your torso, so the rotation help each other. Right now you don't have that. You have kind of a very straight spine here at the top. It has to be straight, and then you extend. So again, it's not correct to help you go into right lateral bend. You kind of try actually, so you have a very good intentions on the upper body. So again, I think it's gonna help a ton for the rest of the journey. But yeah, you kind of from your left pelvic tilt, right hip flexion, you're going to right pelvic tilt and a slide. And we can see that you have a very high left shoulder because of this, because you kind of go into right pelvic tilt plus kind of the correct movement, so you end up here and you end up stuck, and this is where the big blocks come from. Because sometimes you are going to do this perfectly and have a straight path, but sometimes your upper body will be too good relative to the rest, and it's going to hold, and this is where the big blocks come from. And because you don't have a ton of roll, then there is no, I mean, it's just almost a square face to path, so not a ton of rotation in the spin axis and not a ton of hook, but a ton of block, and that's and very high balls. So that's where this is coming from. So it's just to give you another look at things. Spine is staying straight. As I said, there is no space for the arms. If you create right lateral bend here, as you can see, I have a nice pocket for my arms to go here. But because of everything, straight spine, then going into right pelvic tilt, slide, straight spine, you have no space. It's actually a good thing because you're going so much up that you need to have no space and just extend the arms. If you were to have space and more right lateral bend, I can imagine impact wouldn't be compatible, and the path wouldn't be 15 degrees to the right, it would be 40. So yeah, not a good idea. What can I say again? Yeah, right pelvic tilt is making right lateral bend impossible because it's way too much shallowing and way too much path to the right. And it also makes no connection between the lower and upper body, basically. Okay, so what do you need to do? And then I will talk about that one last thing. So we really need to reverse that pattern of right hip flexion. So what you're going to try and do, don't change anything, don't really look at this hands forwards position. It's not really a big problem. As I said, this could trigger this kind of takeaway. That's not what you're doing, so don't really work on that. We'll see if that moves when you get through the first changes. So first thing first, really, you need to avoid doing that. You need to avoid doing that because that triggers extension, and that triggers bad compensation moves on the spine. Because if you create a ton of depth here and go down, everything's going down, so there's no way you get this movement in. So left lateral bend, there's no way it's in, so it's kind of a very straight left part of your torso. We can see that this is very, very straight at the end. That tells us that there is right lateral bend, so the spine is curved that way, that way, and not that way. This won't keep the scapula, the arms. These moves won't stay in check if this is giving up. This is kind of right lateral bend, right spine extension, and it puts your scapula in a bad place. You can be very deep, very retracted. again, you are not hurt by this a ton. You don't have a ton of protraction over the top move. You don't have it, but it may come when you'll get the first part of the changes in. So we have to do two things in just one action, one big backswing change. We have to do two movements to make sure that you're not hurt by this move when you will get the right hip fixed. So my prescription is going to be hip extension on the backswing. It may feel exaggerated, it is. Actually, you don't need to extend a ton, but you need to go in this direction. If you go in this direction, sitting down, there's no way you're going to be able to reverse the pattern. So I would advise you to have this right hip shoot in front, almost if you wanted the socket, the femur, to go vertically exactly over the balls of the feet, instead of trying to make it gain depth. So it is strange. It is strange. How are you going to get a pelvic turn doing that? Okay, you have to change the conception of the way you see a pelvic turn. You don't have pelvic turn. This is not turning because this is gaining depth. This is turning because there is good movements happening in here, in the coxofemoral joint. So it's not really you trying to move the pelvis. It's more of your feet are on the ground, so anything that happens between the femur and the pelvis makes your pelvis turn. And one other thing, the spine can make your pelvis turn because you need to be balanced, and that's exactly what we're looking for. Right now your equation is right hip flexion, right lateral bend, and kind of deep arms. That's why you stay balanced. We need to change that and go right hip extension, left lateral bend. And as you can see, I have turned my hips a ton. My left hip is high, I have left lateral bend, and I can now flex, go from left lateral bend to right lateral bend, and end up in a pretty good place. So first movement is going to be very bizarre for you, is from here trying to have this joint moving in space in front or exactly vertically on top of the balls of the feet. And you're going to say, okay, but how am I supposed to turn the pelvis? Well, you are going to turn the pelvis because you are going to allow for internal rotation on this right hip. Basically, the left part of your pelvis is going to get closer to your right kneecap. That's how you do things, and you can do this. If you are extended, you can do this. If you are flexed, you can do this. This is not a problem. So pelvic turn will be possible even if you feel like this right hip is blocking you and it's not allowing you to get any turn. So it's going to turn, and the matching move for this right hip extension, because it makes you go forwards, makes you early extend in the backswing. What are you going to do? You are going to curve your spine this way and have things balancing the equation, putting you a bit more down and here. And you're going to end up in a pretty good place. These movements are going to stay in check because if I'm in left lateral bend, there's not a lot if you are in left lateral bend, there's not a ton of room here. Because otherwise, if I'm in right lateral bend here, I can go very far, very retracted, very abducted, very externally rotated, very spine extended. You cannot do that if you are here, crunched with this side rounded, this side stretch, and if everything is going up and away because of this right hip going here, everything is going to go. You are going to be in left lateral bend, so tilted down, but it's not tilted down and going down like so. This is left hip flexion, this is right hip flexion. We don't want that. We want extension, extension, and here. And here you will be able to flex go to right lateral bend, have a really nice pocket here, so you have space, have a good connection between upper and lower body, so anything that happens here is transferred to the upper body, so you get to this kind of position, stay in your spine angle, have space for your arms to stay bent, for this leg to be retained. Yeah, it's just a win-win situation. So right hip flexion, nope, right hip extension, and no right lateral bend, left lateral bend. Some people have a big misconception on how they need to create left lateral bend. So left lateral bend is not something that happens very low in the spine. So it's not like we're going here. Something that happens more here in the thoracic. So it's more happening here. So it is bending here. It's not really a full tilt, and people misunderstand that and end up going, okay, I'm left lateral bending, but they're just dropping everything and nothing is happening here. So you have to be able to create it with right hip flexion, right hip extension, and left lateral bend. That's the easiest way to reverse your pattern. I think your upper body is doing great things, so typically transition will take care of itself for the most part. Because you are already extended, you will have room to go into flexion. We'll have to see what's happening with this right foot, but typically it won't be unweighted that much because you will have weight on the heel and not on the toes anymore. Left lateral bend will make you feel weight on the heel. Right lateral bend will make it go on the toes. Yeah, I mean, just yeah, I think that's the two main ingredients that you need to get in. And that's it for today. There's already a ton. I mean, it's not like there is a ton of things to get around, but I think you need to understand the consequences because your pattern is a bit unusual and there are compensations. And if you just say, well, just don't slide, it's not going to work. If you say, well, don't extend the arms, stay bent, it's not going to work. I mean, your geometry, near impact is a consequence of what happens in transition, and you are hurt big times in this phase of the swing. So, okay, I hope it's good for today. Again, work on that. Send me feedback, and we'll make another analysis in a few weeks to make sure that your baseline moves, the ones that were good, are still in, and the kind of unusual moves are gone. So let's hope for the best, and I'll see you in the next video.